All right, we are back with the Sage Advice update, and we're going to go through multi-classing all the way through combat. And yeah, we're going to try to make this one a little bit quicker because there's a lot to cover in combat. So, first thing, multi-classing. Are the ability score improvements class level dependent or rather total level dependent? So when you multi-class, you're taking a certain number of levels in one class. Say you start off by taking 2 levels in Rogue, and then you decide at third level that you want to take a level in Warlock or Ranger or something else. They're asking, are your ability score improvements based off of the total number of levels you have, which would be in this case 3, or is it off of the specific classes level? So you're a first level ranger and you're a second level rogue. And the answer is that they are based on the class level. So if you're a fourth level multi-class, there's no way that you could have received an ability score improvement because neither of your classes would be at fourth level, which is the minimum requirement for an ability score modifier. Do you gain proficiency in more saving throws when you multi-class? A class offers various starting proficiency, and it's based off of your first class. So the starting class proficiencies and saving throw proficiencies are going to be different than if you were to multi-class and then take a second class. You're not necessarily going to get the same starting proficiencies, but you will get the proficiencies based off of specialty things in that class. It says here, regardless of whether a class is your first, you do gain any proficiency that the class grants through its features. For instance, if you gain a level in Cleric and choose the War Domain, you do benefit from the bonus proficiencies feature even if the Cleric is not your original class. That's good to know. I wasn't completely certain on that, but it's good to know. Can a rogue monk multi-class use sneak attack with an unarmed strike? This is that same thing that we were talking about last episode. An unarmed strike is not a weapon, so it doesn't qualify for sneak attack. Again, I know it's weird. Monks just get an exception to their hands being weapons for the sake of like stunning strike and using their key points. So, in contrast, a rogue monk can use sneak attack on monk weapons, such as a short sword or a dagger, that has one of the required properties, so like a finesse weapon or something of the sort, or a ranged monk weapon. Last thing in multi-class. A wizard multi-class into wild magic sorcerer. Do spells cast from their spellbook trigger wild magic surge if they are on the sorcerer spell list, or do they have to be gained from sorcerer in order to trigger? So you gain different levels on sorcerer that are just ones that you pick at your level because you're a sorcerer, and then you have a spell book that you get for being a wizard. Wild magic sorcerers have to roll wild magic surge potential every time they cast a numbered spell. They're asking basically, does that still happen for the wizard spells as well, or wizarding spells that are learned but are sorcerer spells? So here's the answer. From the multi-classing rules, each spell you know and prepare is associated with one of your classes. This rule means only the spells gained from the levels in sorcerer trigger wild magic surge. So even if you were to take a sorcerer spell in your wizarding levels when like you level up in wizard, it's not going to matter. Make sure that you're aware of which spells you learn as a sorcerer because of your innate magic, because those are the ones that are channeling this wild magic ability. Let's hop into some feats real quick. There's not many of them that I want to go over, but I want to go over a couple of feats before we get into combat. Okay, first, this is found on the Polearm Master. Does Polearm Master let me make an opportunity attack against a target that is being forced to approach me? A creature doesn't provoke any opportunity attack if it's moved without the use of its movement or its movement action. or its reaction. So this is something that I think is pretty interesting because it's come up in other games that I've played too. Say I'm a barbarian and there's an enemy adjacent to me, and the druid wants to cast Grasping Vine. They grab the enemy, pull them back. Do I get an attack of opportunity? The answer is no, because the character that's leaving my space, the enemy that's leaving my space, isn't doing so willingly. They're not moving themselves, they're being forcibly moved. And that doesn't constitute a attack of opportunity. You don't get one in that case. Another thing that they use here, that they use as an example, um, is Dissonant Whispers, which requires the target to move using its reaction if available. So that would incur an attack of opportunity because they are moving with things within their abilities. So their reaction, their bonus action, their action, their movement. If they're using any of their action economy to move, then yes, you get an attack of opportunity. Otherwise, it ain't happening. With Savage Attacker, you get extra die to your crit, but it does need to be made with a weapon. It's weapon damage, and unarmed strikes are not weapons. Does the tough feature have an effect on the druid while in beast form? The intention is no. The tough feat affects the druid's hit points, which are replaced by beast hit points while using wild shape. It's important because I feel like a lot of times we want to transfer over any hit point maximum differential to your wild shape, but your wild shape is straight up stat block beast form as far as hit points go. Let's move on to ability checks. Now, I've highlighted this in blue because it's something that I think DMs and house rules have probably gone against for a really long time. I know I don't do it this way, and the change in the rules or the clarification of the rules doesn't necessarily change that. It probably won't. Can you critical hit on an ability check? For example, a grapple attempt does a critical win or the highest number. So if I as a DM am using a creature who has a strength bonus of +9, and you are grappling me with a fighter who only has a strength bonus of +4, and you go and roll an ability check against me, and you roll a natural 20, but your total would be 24, and I roll an 18, and my total would then be higher than yours, who wins out? The rules as written and the way that they're clarifying here is that you lose. You couldn't have rolled any higher. This is the limiting factor on your abilities. You would lose in that instance. I think most people at the table do use natural 20s and natural 1s in ability checks similarly to that attack roll, even though attack rolls are the only thing that actually create critical failures and critical successes as being automatic hits or automatic fails. That being said, I understand where they're coming from, and I think as a dungeon master, I could even get on board with this to a degree. I would like to give people the opportunity to do well with a natural 20, meaning that with a natural 20, I will give you the maximum amount of success that you could have without completely succeeding. Or with a natural 1, I don't see many options in which you would succeed, unless, of course, you're going up against an enemy who could also roll a natural 1, in which case we are just using your modifier anyways. So, for example, say someone is trying to convince a king to give them a free plot of land in their kingdom. The king is from an enemy kingdom and doesn't like the party, knows where they come from, and isn't going to give it up to them, period, no matter what they do. The bard of the party rolls a natural 20, has a great bonus, but the maximum that the king would ever give them is an opportunity to prove themselves to his kingdom as being allied with them instead of with an enemy, not to just go ahead and give over a large slot of land to the party. I think that's a reasonable compromise, and I wouldn't be angry if a party member kind of wanted some kind of success from a maximum roll. Let's move on to adventuring. There's a couple points that they have in adventuring that I wanted to take a look at, and a couple that they didn't that I want to bring up. First, the frightened condition says, while the source of its fear is within line of sight. Does that mean that you have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks even if the source is invisible, but you have a clear line of sight on its space? I understand the question. It's a dope question. Like, if I know where the creature was and I can see its clear line of space, but I can't see the creature in the first place, do I have disadvantage when trying to attack it? I mean, you probably would have disadvantage on trying to attack an invisible creature in the first place, but I would agree with this ruling that no, you can't see the creature. It doesn't matter if it's in line of sight if you can't see it. So, in no greater terms, basically, if you can't see it, then you're not affected by fear. Second, does casting a spell while taking a short rest interrupt that rest? That is yes. That's also true for long rests. If you're resting, you're resting. You're not casting spells. You're not in combat. You're not taking watch for longer periods of time. You are relaxing. You are chilling. Two things that I thought they missed in adventuring that I would have liked to have answered. One I actually referred to in the last episode, which is straight up what's going on with the Circle of Dreams, Hearth of the Moonlight and Shadows. I don't know. I'd need that cleared up. The second is when adventuring and traveling long distances, there's a rule where after a certain number of hours of travel, I believe it's 8, the party will have to make rolls every hour for exhaustion. And exhaustion is kind of a big deal. I'm wondering how this affects a mounted rider. I understand if you're in a carriage, like if you're being ridden and you have a driver and you can actually sleep in the back of the carriage, you're not having to make those rolls and still being able to make up distance. What if you're riding a horse? Or you're a gnome riding a mastiff or something? Do you roll exhaustion? I imagine you would. Does your animal, your steed, roll exhaustion? Both? I don't know, but I think it's an important thing to look at. Last up for today, let's take a look at combat. Combat and spellcasting are huge sections, so we're going to split them up. If a wizard casts a spell like Fireball during a surprise round, do the enemies get disadvantage on their saving throws? Being surprised doesn't have any effect on your spell saves. If you're surprised, the big things that it takes away is your action and your movement. So you can't move and you can't take an action, but it doesn't mean that you can't make a saving throw just as well as before. You're just cut off guard, so you're not able to attack or really move any kind of great distance. I think if you're going to relate this to the previous point about evasion, the idea is that you can't move out of your 5-foot square, but you can still shift and move. Can you delay your turn and take it in a later round? Yeah, the answer is no. And I think a lot of people want to be able to defer, maybe because of previous editions or something. But the biggest reasons that I agree with in this section are that they already give you the option to ready actions, which means you stay in your initiative order, but you can hold an action for a trigger until your next round of combat. The reason why they do this is that when you ready an action, you're not readying movement, you're not readying a bonus action. You have to use your action economy the way that you would like to on a triggering event. If it doesn't happen, that goes away, combat continues, the initiative goes all the way through. If everyone's allowed to defer their actions, then so are the enemies. The enemies can defer their actions, and you can end up in an extremely long round of combat, which honestly would take advantage of things like your spell effect duration, like to the next turn until your next turn. What if on this round I had an oath bow and fired it and everybody gets advantage on that creature until my next turn, and then I defer my next turn till the end of the round? It's a way of keeping that from happening. It's a way of keeping everyone from deferring behind one another and making combat sluggish. It makes things happen a little bit snappier and gives you the option of readying an action, for a specific event so that the initiative order can keep being run through. And to be honest, as a dungeon master, I really appreciate this in not having to reorder my initiative every time somebody doesn't know what to do on their turn. It does give the suggestion here, if you don't know what to do on your turn, ready an action or use the dodge action, which is going to make it harder for someone to hit you if they were to try. So another thing to think of in that instance is if you are going to ready an action, spells readied will be lost if you ready it and the condition does not get met. If you're preparing a spell and you're getting ready to cast said spell and you are readying it for, I don't know, say a bad guy to run into the room and they don't do that before your next turn, that spell slot is gone. Can a bonus action be used as an action and vice versa? For example, can a bard use a bonus action to grant bardic inspiration or an action to cast healing word? The answer is no. The action economy is not like actual economy with like dimes and nickels where things can be interchanged at different rates. It's not like you can use a bonus action or something that has the casting time of a bonus action for an action because actions are typically worth more than a bonus action. It doesn't work that way. A bardic inspiration or healing word are going to use what they say they use, a bonus action or an action, depending on what the spell says. You can't use a bonus action for an action or an action for a bonus action. Bard could use bardic inspiration or healing word on their turn, but not both. So you couldn't cast like 2 bonus action spells on your turn, subbing one out for your action. How does a reach weapon work with opportunity attacks? An opportunity attack is triggered when someone goes outside of your reach, outside of your ability to strike them. I can see why someone would think that if an enemy is adjacent to you, and then say like you're using a halberd or something, a polearm weapon, and you have reach, like something that has a 10-foot reach or 2 squares of reach. If somebody's adjacent to you and then you were to step 1 step back, you would think, oh, attack of opportunity. That's not the case. If they're still in your engagement zone, they're not incurring an attack of opportunity. So if they move outside of your 10-foot reach, then that triggers the attack of opportunity for you, and that also works for creatures. If I have a 15-foot swinging radius with, a giant creature with a giant-ass sword, then the chances are, as long as you stay within that range, you're not incurring an attack of opportunity if you step back a little bit. There's actually more freedom of movement inside of a larger range, though there are more squares that can be affected by that range. Can a blinded creature make opportunity attacks? An opportunity is triggered by a hostile creature that you can see. If you can't see the creature, no opportunity attack. A creature with like blind sight or any ability that allows you to see within a certain radius even though you're blinded, then of course you can still make that attack. Can an opportunity attack be used to make a grapple or a shove? Grappling and shoveling are special attacks that require the attack action. An opportunity attack is a special reaction. Take the ready to action if you want to attempt a grapple or a shove reaction. So even if you're taking like the ready action, what you're doing is you're readying an action to use with your reaction to make it happen when a trigger happens. And they even say that it's a special type of attack to grapple or shove, but I think it's even considered, I don't think you make an attack roll. You're making an ability check when you're making those rolls anyways. When you use 2-weapon fighting, can you draw and throw 2 weapons on your turn? You can throw 2 weapons with 2-weapon fighting, but that rule doesn't give you the ability to draw 2 weapons for free. On your turn, you can interact with 1 object for free, either during your move or during your action. One of the most common object interactions is drawing or storing a weapon. Interacting with a second object on the same turn requires an action. You need a feature like dual wielder in order to use the second weapon for free. And keep in mind, if there is something like dual wielder, which allows you to use that second weapon for free, you're not allowed to do it unless you have that feature. The easy answer to this is try to keep both weapons on hand at the same time, and you won't have to worry about that economy at all. A dragon uses its breath weapon on me. I succeed on the save, and I have resistance to the damage. Do I take only 1/4 damage? Yes, you take 1/4 damage. I've played in games where you'll take no damage just as a DM ruling. I think it's typically just to avoid math, but if you want, you can kind of do it either way. But rules as written, if you take half damage on half damage, you would take 1/4 damage. Last couple of things here. Are natural weapons considered weapons? Things designed as weapons in the rules, including natural weapons, are indeed weapons. In contrast, unarmed strikes are not weapons. They are something you do with an unarmed part of your body. Last thing, can I make an attack with one weapon and then draw a second weapon in order to qualify for two-weapon fighting? To use two-weapon fighting as a bonus action, you must have both weapons in hand when you make your first attack. That's pretty much it for combat. One thing that I think could be explained is your item interactions. I think people just get confused with item interaction, magic item interaction, potions. This whole economy is important, but the words are too similar to one another. So more so than even like clarifying the rules, I think it'd be cool if we just had some different language around the item usage, because a free item interaction and then you have items that you can't use for free gets kind of confusing. That's all I got for today. Next week we'll go over the last bit of this, starting with spellcasting. I'm looking forward to talking you through it and kind of getting to learn a little bit more about it. Peace.